Okay, welcome back, folks. This is House Corrections and Institutions Committee. It is Thursday, April 24th, and we are taking testimony on Windsor. There is nothing in the Capitol bill on Windsor.
I know, but there were pictures of it at one point that they gave us, didn't they?
And we're just going to get some background on the facility, the lands. There is about 900 acres there total, 800, 900, give or take. And there was about 100 acres that were really used when it was used as a correctional facility. And the other 800 or so acres was transferred into a wildlife management area that's under the Department of Fish and Wildlife. And that must have occurred at least 10 years ago. Because at least 10 years ago, because you were there and Obie was commissioner. So that was at least 10 years ago. We worked with the representative from Windsor at the time, and we worked with BGS and the Commissioner of Fish and Wildlife. And at the time, they said, well, we could use this property as a wildlife management. So we transferred about 800 acres and left about 100 acres because it was still being operated as a correctional facility, as the work camp. And so part of that is under the management of Fish and Wildlife, and they're here today. And then we closed down the work camp because we didn't have enough folks who were incarcerated that qualified. So we closed it, and it's been closed since probably about 17, 18, something around that time.
17?
Yeah, it's 17. It's been closed, and trying to figure out what to do with this property. So I think it would be good to give some history on the BGS's piece in terms of what has happened with the property, what you had to do. We are paying to keep it. We have not mothballed it. We do have to keep the heat and water on to a certain extent, but it has not been completely mothballed. And the question is, what do we do with these buildings and what do we do with the property? Connor.
So it was in the Capitol bill that we had language on this last year, right? Or the year
Yes.
before?
It was last year, and it was to see if we could transfer some property over to possibly Fish and Wildlife or whatever. So we can get into that. What I really want to do is spend time to get the background first before we transition into that. So people can understand all the moving pieces, because there's a lot to this. Because there's been proposals in the past from the administration that we sell the property. And there's been studies in terms of what could be done with the property. And if we were to sell the property at any point in time, it's our committee, it's this committee that needs to get the authority to do that. Brian.
So are there proposals immediately at hand, or are we just learning about this now because we got some time?
We're hearing about it now because we have some time.
Okay.
Because it's not going to go away.
Yep.
So, and there's a lot of background information to this. So Commissioner, come on up.
I'm only going to be here for a few minutes.
Oh, but they're so valuable.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate that after this week.
Yeah.
So,
Steady YouTubes, yes.
so Wanda Manoli, Commissioner of Buildings and General Services. I really appreciate the opening that you just made and the summary, just talking about the history. So we're prepared, Joe's prepared to really give you the visual of some of the items that you just talked about. And then to your point, Representative Casey, there was a language in the Capitol bill about looking at a study and looking at maybe expanding some of the property line for the preservation. What I would like to remind the committee, and I'm not sure if we'll have time today, in 2021, we received Act 50 H 438, had a report delivered to the legislature, and it was by Thomas Kennedy, who's the executive director of Mount Ascutney Regional Commission. And BGS did participate in that. This report really reflects on potential use by Windsor and the community with the remaining 118 acres. What is interesting and why I asked to start first is I've recently been in conversations with Representative Burrow and Senator Major because there's interest to they want to visit the site and there's still interest around this concept. So I have said we will be available and we will walk the site. To your point, it's been vacated since 2017. Joe and I brought out our abacus and we estimated that it's about 250,000 to 300 a year to keep it in the mothballed condition, which now has been well over $2 million roughly. So it is property that I believe there was also a study in 2018 that you asked BGS to look at this land. There's been multiple studies.
That was, if any.
And to look at the land to see how it could be used for other correctional programs or programs in the Agency of Human Services. And we've studied that multiple times. I think we've discussed it over the years since there was also a study in 2002 and in the 2015. So we do have a piece of property. It is 100 acres. It sits in the heart of a community. So I think this is, while you're informing your committee, I think this is a great opportunity to start the discussions.
I think too, what's really important, I hope we can have a visual too, which I'm assuming of the whole property and where it's located. It used to be our working farm for our correctional facility. It was the original state prison before we had regional prisons, regional jails, correctional facilities in Chittenden and St. Johnsbury and Rutland. People that were detained and starting to go through the courts were held at the sheriff's office. And it was during the late 60s, really through the 70s, that if anyone was sentenced, they would go to Windsor. That was our state prison. Up until about the end of the 60s and through the 70s is when we shifted from a county-based system where detainees were held at the sheriff's office and the local lockups while they were waiting trial. And then when they were sentenced, they go to the state prison in Windsor. That was a working farm. It was a dairy farm, and the folks who were sentenced worked the farm. So they were under state custody. Detainees were not under state custody. That started shifting in the 70s. It became a state system for DOC. So the regional facilities were then developed. So detainees would go to those regional facilities and not stay at the sheriff's lockup. And then then St. Albans was also built. That was intended for a juvenile center, but never opened. That became another correctional facility for sentence folks. So over time, Windsor was not the only correctional facility that was holding sentence folks. It was St. Albans, and then we built Newport in the early 90s. And then we built Springfield in the late 90s, early 2000s.
And then you shifted Windsor to a women's facility for a short period of time. And we ran the programs that you started out of Windsor. The license plate, the furniture program. It has its history.
Yeah, and then it got shifted to the work camp. And then it got closed. So this facility has been in state ownership. I don't know when was
100 years. I think Joe told me that.
early 1900s.
1916. It's when we opened.
That's when we opened.
It was a farm.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
a farm. And then when all the other facilities started opening up, all the other facilities were medium security. The Windsor facility was a minimum security.
Right.
And what happened in DOC before all of the overcrowding, if a person was getting near time for them to reenter the community, like maybe a couple years prior, and it depended on their behavior while they were incarcerated, if they were abiding by the rules and did as they were told, a few years prior to their release, they would go to Windsor because it was minimum security. They didn't need as much security. And that was the model that DOC had through the 70s and 80s and even the 90s. And it wasn't until we started ballooning in the early 2000s, late 90s of population more people being incarcerated. So that whole model just fell apart because we needed all the beds. So that's kind of the history there, of this whole facility. Troy.
Sure, just back to the report. One thing that's in the report is your request for, right-of-way easements and things for continued use. Does that indicate a position on
So which report?
the report from, was it Fish and Wildlife's report?
Yes. So, I think what we.
Yeah.
If we're gonna
Right.
expand,
Okay.
so what I'd like to propose, if you don't have any other questions,
Yeah,
from me, I'd like to table that one so Emily
Gotcha.
could answer it. Is I'd like to have Director Asia,
Yeah.
present to you just some of the visuals. And then because you do have our partners from, Forest Parks and Recreations are also in here. Emily.
Wildlife.
Fish and Wildlife. I apologize for that. And then Emily, when I came in as commissioner, this is one of the reports that we asked for an extension on because we had not been working quite in partnership. So Emily took the lead on that. We have a little bit of comment, but
Okay.
I think that what you have in front of you is we have this report and this request, and you also have a community and some of your
Yeah.
members of the House and Senate asking once again for some evaluation. So
Hey,
Thank you.
Joe,
Thank you.
come on up. She warmed up the seat for you.
thank you. Thank you.
Welcome, Joe.
Morning, thank you.
Be back in the house, right?
Yes, yes. Leave it at that. For the record, I'm Joe Aja, the Director of Design and Construction with Buildings and General Services.
So your screen up on our screen's black.
I know that, I'm getting to that.
Okay.
I'm going to show you some photos that I think that'll show the whole outline of the property and then drill down through to what we're looking at today with Fish and Wildlife. So this is coming from a report that was done in 2023 by Bell Design Studios by the Windsor Community Planning Commission. And I think what we're looking at here is in this photo, if we catch up, is the blue outline is the total acreage that was known as the Southeast State Correctional Facility back in the day. Looking at the history, the state started purchasing land back in the 1800s when they were looking to get out of the Windsor State Facility down in town. And they were buying up farmland. They gave some of that land to the hospital, and then they retained the remaining 945 acres.
So Joe, where is the road? Where, part of the issue with this whole thing, it's kind of isolated. It's not, it's near the interstate, but it is not. It's out of the town, the village of Windsor by probably about,
3 miles.
is it three?
As the
It's
road
longer
is,
than
so
that.
if you look at here, here's down here along Route 5, you have Main Street downtown Windsor, and then you take the road up here that's 3.3 miles to State Farm Road that brings you up into the correctional facility,
Where's the hospital, Mount Escutney Hospital?
right here.
Right there. Okay.
So here's the interstate, so it does cross through. There was one point in time when we were looking to actually put an exit in there, when we were looking to expand the population down there, and I think that was in the
90s.
early 90s, I believe, yes. Well, we went to Newport, so.
Yeah, it was the
Right after
late,
that, we went
yeah,
to
it was the late 80s. I remember there was a discussion.
90 some odd bed facility that we were looking
Yeah.
at.
It's already on sewer and water.
Town sewer, water's a well,
Okay.
or 2 wells, actually.
So the issue for redeveloping this area is access from the interstate, because you either have to get off at the Heartland Windsor exit and come in, or you go down to the Ascutney exit and then back up. So it's not a direct line. You've got to go out of your about 8 to 10 miles out of the way in order to get there.
The exit,
It's way over,
right, right here.
further out, yeah. If you're coming from the north. If
From the
you're
north,
coming
right.
from
From the south, it's
different.
even longer. Unless you take the scenic routes and the back roads.
Yeah,
So, and also on this area here that we're showing is this blue outline. Started in 1995. We did land management plan with Forest Park and Recreation at the time for 853 acres. That was a 20 years and then it expired. And as mentioned earlier, working with Commissioner Wojciechowski, it came into in March of 2017, the executive order to transfer 826 plus or minus acres to Fish and Wildlife. And that's roughly what you're seeing here. The little red circle is approximately 118 plus acres that was retained for the correctional facility.
so the buildings don't take up all 100 acres, but they needed buffer around there for security.
Correct.
So that's why.
As you can see in here, here's that red line we were talking about, and then the blue line, outer line, inside the facility. This area here is the perimeter road that goes around the facility, but we're looking at this red line of that 118 acres that was carved out in that executive order.
So you come in to the left of that red line.
Right in here
Where you
is the
come in
road.
from the road.
Correct. And as the commissioner stated, the buildings, depends on the building. Some of these buildings were never heated. Several of them are, and we are keeping the lights on, the heat on, sprinkler systems, fire alarm systems, all operational. We have Vermont Public Safety, State Police, K-9 unit is down there. They do a lot of training down there, and A&R still has some storage. As Commissioner stated, roughly 250 to 300,000 in fee for space to keep the lights on. Public safety and through fee for space is charged 42,000 for use of that per year.
So is that on
A&R
top of the 250 or is
No,
that
it's
part of the?
it's part of that 250 and then 14,000 for A&R and their storage. So
2,000?
two other agencies, departments were getting funding to supplement that 250.
You maintaining the baseball diamond, the
Pardon?
baseball diamond?
No, I think that has grown over quite well now without having individuals down there to keep it in proper order.
That's a,
The silage is still in some of the silos there.
okay.
Yes, the mice really like it, or the rats. So then what it's come forth really now is next with Fish and Wildlife looking to expand the area inside of this red line. And I think if I can bring up something that was presented, I believe, last year to us in this blue area is the area that Fish and Wildlife, and I will certainly let them talk about that, but expanding into that area. And it really outlines on this lower half is right tight up against the fence. This area, this building here, which known as Echo Building or the dorm,
Oh, that's,
these fences from the roof is probably about 3 feet away from the fence. 5 feet probably from the building itself to the fence line. This little bump out over here is our water storage tank. So back in late 2000, 2010 maybe, 15, we did a water line up in their storage tanks because our well house that we had kept having bacterial hits. And so we did put in a tank. Plus, we also did away with using the pond that was up there, the fire pond that was constructed by the inmates at the time for all the sprinkler systems. And so what we had done is we got off of the pond water because the dam had issues, and we built this tank. Off to the left of this photo where you can see the red road going up, there are still an area that we would need to retain because that is where our well house is located. So that goes back to I think your question is still needing to have access to some of these rights of way to maintain and get access to the buildings. Some of the issues that we have with being tied up against the fence is the buffer. There are certain buffers, and again, Fish and Wildlife can certainly talk about it. It's in their report about the wetlands, the deer yards and the likes of that have to be maintained. And some of those are very tight inside of that blue area. So though that area could not be built on to begin with. If I go back to the Bell report and skip ahead, they produced a drawing of what we can do with the property.
And Joe, do you have pictures of the current buildings?
I don't have it with me here.
Yeah, it'd be good for the committee to see what is actually there for current buildings, because you got silos, you got barns, open pole barns. Then the core facility itself would be good for the members to see some of those buildings, current buildings,
That's nice.
to understand what's up.
So housing, right, Joe?
Basically housing, they proposed leaving some of the buildings. When you're looking at this area here is known as the yellow house in the garage. That was a maintenance facility. This here is the education building, dorm dining, the Echo building, and the administration office now is in this building here, and then that was one of the future buildings off in here. I think that was the sign shop. Plate shop, sorry, the plate shop where they actually did make license plates. The other buildings on there that are gray shaded, it's just a proposal that they were looking for. And that really does all take place inside of the fenced area. So there's roughly 26 acres inside the fence area out of that 118 that's carved out right now. This area here along here is a very steep bank. You certainly couldn't build on it. There is a flat area here where I believe they're showing additional solar or relocating the solar field that was over on the left side. And then the rest of it, again, there's wetlands and deer yards and the likes of that would actually prohibit future expansion beyond what you're seeing here.
So that is a proposal, but we would have to figure out, you got to tear down some buildings. Who pays for that? You've got state land. Do we lease the land? Do we sell the land? Is this an asset? Because we know we have pressures in some of areas in the state, like juvenile center, male facilities, reentry facilities for males. Do we let go of 100 acres?
And it's
That's
100
the balance.
And it's 100 acres with an estimated right now 26 acres of development.
Developable, yes.
It's developable.
Yes.
Right, based on the analysis, several that have been done.
Several. And that's always been the balance. And that's why I think it would be good at some point. I think probably Troy, you can zoom into the Windsor facility and pop up what some of the buildings look like. We could do that later.
You know, depend on how.
Yeah, but it's important, I think, for the committee members to visually see those buildings, because some of them will.
I'll search online, but I could find them.
Some of those buildings will have to be torn down. And even the current buildings that could be inhabited might need a lot of renovations. And that's the balance act that we would have to play.
Correct. I've been in discussion because I've been getting a lot of interest, as I shared with the committee from your counterparts. And I'm making this statement, and Joe may correct me. But it's my understanding through these studies, we have had discussions with historic preservations, and they have acknowledged and that they don't have any expectation of rehabilitation.
That is correct. We've been kicking around for years about the silos were the biggest ones, so whether or not we could get rid of the historic value. There was a report done that says basically historic preservation has evaluated it and all the buildings can go. And in 2022, we actually, we were chasing sampling for lead and asbestos throughout the complex. And we came up with an estimate of just over $5 million for demolition. And that would include the abatement of the lead and the
Was that
asbestos.
for all the buildings?
That was all the buildings at that time, yes.
Even the core where it was the administrative building and where
Yes.
the cells were and everything, so it'd be all the buildings.
All the buildings, but since 2022, that cost is a lot higher now.
And you'd have to get rid of the fence too, right?
Yes.
There's barbed wire fence and that's expensive to get rid of that too.
So Madam Chair, Joe's looking quickly online to see if we have some actual photos.
I think it would help the committee to see.
Yeah.
I can only do an overhead.
But I think that, as you continue discussion around this, and it's, the cost that you're bringing up, I think has to be a part of it. And if you explore options, we have known facts about the site. There are costs for, if a developer or community, if that was one way that it would go, that they would have to incur. And I think that's the balance, in what's the value of the land.
That's what we've always been struggling with. Connor?
Is it that Mount Scottney group still at the table at the moment here? Or?
I'm not quite sure. I had a conversation with Representative Burrows yesterday. They have she said there is a community group. It could be the same one. I did not ask. I've had same and similar conversations with the senator representing the area. So I've made ourselves available to give them a tour.
Got it. Thanks.
Other questions?
My computer does not want to work that fast at downloading some of this stuff.
If you wanna take would you like to move on to the other study while we look at that? Would that help, Madam Chair?
I'll get some.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
and why don't we do that? The Fish and Wildlife Study you're looking at, right?
It's a suggestion.
So who's gonna be presenting the Fish and Wildlife Study? Is it Fish and Wildlife folks here? Is it DPS? You are, right?
Excuse me. Well, why don't I introduce ourselves and then we can decide what works best for all of you.
Come on up to the hot seat here.
Good morning. My name is John Austin. I'm the Director of the Wildlife Division with the Vermont Fish and Wildlife Department. Wildlife Division, among other things, is responsible for the oversight of all of the department's wildlife management areas. We own 105 of them. It's roughly 138,000 acres, ranging in size from 50 acres to 25,000 acres scattered around the state. And the Windsor Grasslands Wildlife Management Area is one of those. With me today is Mr. Chris Bernier. He's one of our senior wildlife biologists, and among other things, one of his responsibilities is the oversight of this particular property. Mr. Bernier has worked since we took ownership of the property with the community of Windsor. The community is very interested, as you know, in this property, and so we work very hard to be a good neighbor with the community, and we're very mindful of their interests in what happens on the property that we own, as well as the property that our colleagues from BGS owns. We're mindful that the community has an interest in expanding residential development opportunities. I think I'll just turn it over to Mr. Bernier because he's got the history and knows all of the details about our management, our ownership, our long-term interests. All to say that from the department's point of view, the main thing in moving forward with the development of the prison facility is a matter of scale. So we're completely in support of expanding residential development for the community. We're also mindful that we need to maintain our ownership interests for the conservation of fish and wildlife on the property, as well as for the public who enjoys the property. If you haven't been there, by the way, it is a beautiful place, just stunning. And this is a great time of year to go.
Field trip.
I strongly encourage you to do so.
It's easier to do that.
It's a place.
Okay.
So I guess I'll turn it over to Mr. Bernier because he really has the details. He knows it intimately. He's worked with our colleagues in BGS and he's worked extensively with the community. So I think you'll benefit from hearing from him. And I'm happy to help field any questions that you may.
Thank you. Thank you. Come on up, Chris. First time you've been in this committee, right?
First time for me in this committee, correct.
Welcome.
Thank you.
You could just identify yourself for the record.
Chris Bernier, I'm a wildlife biologist. I work out of the Springfield District Office. My history here only goes back to approximately 2017, which you'll recall from the conversation up to this point is exactly when this transitions to Vermont Fish and Wildlife. I think we closed in the fall of 2017 on the 826 acres, which is now the Windsor Grasslands Wildlife Management Area. I had at that time transitioned from different roles with the department into a land management role, primarily managing wildlife management areas like this one at the district level. And so I think well, first there's two things I'd like to do here to start. And one is to just set the stage of what I bring to the table, what I offer for input here is the management aspect, the management challenges that we face on this WMA, the management goals that we have for that property and how we intend to get there. And the other thing is really more related to the diversity and the interest that the community has for this property. From a manager perspective, it is incredible. We have, I think you said 105 wildlife management areas across the state, and I don't have a study to say this with certainty, but my suspicion is this is probably one of the more popular WMAs that we have. And it's certainly one of the most diverse use WMAs that we have. For example, we have birding, which is a burgeoning activity here in the state, one that we support greatly. And this is a hotspot, literally considered a hotspot for birding in the Connecticut River Valley for the diversity of species that are known to exist there. To date, we've documented over 120 different bird species through things like eBird and the Natural Heritage Database that we maintain and other forms of reporting from the birding community. 25 of those species are what we call species of greatest conservation need, medium and high priority, that are known to exist and utilize this property. We have a lot of hunting interest on this property. It's in an area where there's not a lot of public lands. We have a Scottney State Park to the south, a short distance, which is an exception to that lack of public land in the area. But what's unique about it is that it's actually close to Windsor, 3 miles, and it's a nice open public land for people to hunt. Turkey hunting, deer hunting, most recently bear hunting. Bears have moved into that area. A lot of different activities there. The other thing that I find unique about this property that I don't see in the other properties that I manage in the district is the level of what I'll call like casual use, whether that's like walking or jogging, cross-country skiing, dog walking. There are several trails that are informal. We don't advertise these trails in any way, but they are there and the local community knows they're there and they enjoy it. There's always people at this property, birding, hunting, walking. And so from a management perspective, it's quite a breadth of things that I have to tend to there. Again, compared to the other properties that I manage, this is by far the most complex. I spend the most of my time at this property overseeing and working with people. So as far as like what I can bring to the conversation, so that was a little bit of just context about the importance of the WMA. But as far as what I can bring to the conversation is really the challenges that we have for managing it and how the retained BGS property that we're here to talk about influences the future of the WMA. So one of the primary objectives that we have with this wildlife management area is grassland birds. And that goes right back to the agricultural history here, not the least of which the correctional facilities use of this land and the almost 200 acres of open land that we maintain there for grassland birds. Again, many of them notable species of greatest conservation need that are known to exist there. And so one of the problems, this is Windsor, this is the birthplace of Vermont. It's the way I like to think of it is it's the place in Vermont that we have been introducing invasive plants the longest because it's the birthplace of Vermont. And so every invasive plant that we have in this state exists on this property. That's a little bit of an exaggeration just to make a point, but
It's the knotweed.
yeah, knotweed and poison parsnip, wild cherry. I mean, there's a long list of players. Every corner of this property has invasive plants on it. And so we have been battling that since our ownership in 2017. Invasive plants have the potential of altering these ecosystems to the detriment of the species that we're trying to maintain there. And so it's really a battle that is worth having for us to tip the scale and getting these natural communities to be their best manifestation of themselves with their native plants and animals. And so we spend tens of thousands of dollars, it varies year to year, in invasive plant control. And that is mowing, that's chemical control, very targeted as we need, but a lot of mowing, hand pulling. I have personally spent days pulling poison parsnip and have scars from it to show for the better part of like 5 or 6 years now. And we are finally tipping the scales. One of the fields that has been the focus of most of our effort here, which is a grassland bird field, is this coming year for the first time, we're going to be able to delay mowing, which means mowing after August 1st so that the grassland birds can get a nest fledged before they get hit by the mowers. And the significance there is that prior to this year, we've had to mow it prior to August 1st in order to control the invasive plants. And we've tipped the scale enough that we're actually moving into achieving our objectives. So bringing it back to the prison facility proper, the BGS retained ownership there. And the picture's still up, it's not, but around the high fence, I call it. Thank you. Yeah, there's a lot of remaining open land. And there is a significant seed source of a number of these invasive plants within that open land. And for us, that's a problem just because we can't control that land. So it makes it a challenge for us to tip the scale against those invasive plants that aren't under our control. And they perform, they act as a seed source that then threatens our successes on our property adjacent to it. So that's one significant issue that we bring to the table, that I bring to the table as something I'd like to be considered. The other thing here, and I think Director Austin said that, the future uses of the prison facility, we're happy with that. Our former Commissioner, Louis Porter, sat in the 2021 committee that produced the report. And, his input was apt and right on target. The recommendations that came out of that I think are pretty sound, and we certainly support those recommendations. But it's a matter of scale. And, we fear that something could happen on the property here that is larger than what the natural communities could handle outside of it on our property. And really, I'm talking about people, lots and lots of people. And again, I understand fully the need in the community and the desires of the community to have, diverse uses there, including residential. But it's a matter of scale. And so the way that we envision this, Vermont Fish and Wildlife, is by acquiring some of this land around the high fence. The exact boundary yet to be determined, of course, but in concept, the area around outside of the high fence, it does two things. It limits to some degree the level of land that can be developed, right? So there's an influence on the scale alone just by the land ownership. And also really it solidifies a buffer between whatever does ultimately happen in the BGS retained portion. Those activities, it buffers those activities from the greater WMA. And so, for example, some of those activities that we see in other properties, not to the degree that we have the potential to see here, but we see these in other properties where housing development is brought up to our lands. You have, illicit uses or trail uses, your trail developments that are beyond our control, just from social trails. People, it's their backyard. We wouldn't want them to not use the property, but it can be overused. And you have pets, as an example, and dogs, cats. Cats are a known issue for grassland birds, or birds of all types, but certainly grassland birds. And that is a significant concern for us because this is a breeding ground for grassland birds. And one of our primary goals of wildlife management areas is hunting, is to provide access to open land that's managed for wildlife for the purposes of hunting, as well as maintaining the natural communities on it. And when you introduce a lot of residents, a lot of public use, that actually is a significant impact on people's ability to hunt there. And we have to be mindful of that as well. So those, I feel like I'm throwing a lot at you all, and I apologize, but there's a lot there to dissect. And I felt, first off, the Commissioner Shortsleeve was not able to be here to talk directly about the report, which she principally authored with BGS. So I don't really want to put words into her mouth. But I feel like where we landed on that report was kind of an appropriate way of getting at some of the issues that we had, and hopefully helping the town to retain, or not the town, but the BGS to retain options with uses of the property, however they deem appropriate. So I don't know if there's any other particular questions that you all had.
There's some questions here, Con.
Yeah, sure. Thanks so much. It's really interesting. So the last proposal we saw last year sort of envisioned 30 acres residential, about 50 apartment units, and 60 single family homes. That'd probably be between 200 and 300 people we're talking there. Is that sort of the scope you could see that would live in harmony with the wildlife management? Or
so I reviewed that proposal, and that was alarming, and understanding the interest behind it and not criticizing that. But it was, in my mind, an issue of scale. And, to put it into perspective, 300 people, which is what I arrived at as an estimate, when you include all the different uses that would be there, not just the residential, because there was a variety of uses. 300 people is half of my hometown of Andover's population on, 60 acres or something. So it's a pretty intensive use. I think that, does that answer your question?
I think I catch your drift.
Yeah, it's a matter of scale and location, of where it is as well, and what it is.
I just want clarity in terms of the pressure that would be put on the wildlife management area. That would be the current area that you have, not if you expanded it
Correct.
around. It's just what you have now, because it was thinking, and part of the report was to look to expand it as well, the wildlife management
Correct.
area around it
Right.
as well. So I just want to be clear that if there was a housing development with a possibility of 300 people, will put a lot of pressure on the current wildlife management area,
That's correct.
regardless And then if we expand the wildlife management area, there's even more pressure that would be put on.
Well, correct me if I'm wrong, the expansion we're talking about is the area that's outside of the high fence
Right.
out to the current boundary. So
Right.
that area will, again, that by going that route, by matter of necessity, you decrease the level of potential development. So you're getting at that scale issue a little bit, and you're also buffering that development better by distance to the existing WMA. So yeah, we would still be keenly interested in looking at future proposals, but this would be going a long way to addressing some of our core concerns with scale.
If you could expand the wildlife.
Yes.
Area.
Yes.
Questions? This is a new topic for folks. Yes. Troy. Oh, almost Troy.
I don't know if anybody can answer or not, but it's been probably 2 years since we took testimony from the Bell Group. What's the energy in and around this site right now? Is it, like, I get asked by the reps occasionally, like, hey, are you taking, but yeah,
So
what's the NIMBY factor here?
I've not spoken to any representatives and your colleagues about this.
What
I
about the
don't
developer?
think ever, and I have certainly not talked with any developers, but I have talked extensively with different members of the local community, users of the WMA. And as you would expect, it's a diverse opinion, right? So everyone comes to it with a little bit of a different angle. But I think universally, the people that I'm dealing with, these are users of the current
Yeah.
WMA, so they may be biased, but universally, they all agree that less is better.
Connor.
We're all up in.
I know.
We're all up in.
We're all there.
So do you think if you did build residential units, would that take hunting off the table for the area? That's something we deal with, like with Country Club Road up in Montpelier quite a bit.
Again, it depends. It depends on the number of units, the type of people that those units are attracting in the sense of, is it a retirement community? Or, so, and where it is located exactly on the property, if it's right out around, in that area we're talking about transferring, I mean, that starts to become pretty close. And yeah, that would affect people's ability to hunt in those areas now around the WMA, around the facility. But not all housing would prevent hunting there. Again, it's really a matter of scale.
Gotcha.
Right.
You have to deal with the bears.
You will have
You have to deal with the bears.
Call Governor Shumlin.
Yeah, right. You'd have to deal with the bears, no bird feeders and no trash. But the bears will be in the backyard of people's homes.
There are bears on this property.
Sean?
So when you say scale, what, we saw a quick picture up there. How many units was there? 100?
I think that was 96.
90. Okay, so 100. Is that okay? Or do you think that's too much, too little? Where are you at with that?
Again, I don't know that I'm in a position to
Well, you keep saying scale, so I was just trying to get at what you think is good or bad.
that level of residential development in the donut hole of a wildlife management area was alarming to me.
Yeah.
Now, whether that is found to be appropriate by all other interests is yet to be determined. But
Right.
to me, as the manager, that was an alarming level of scale. That was too much.
Yeah, but that's what makes it affordable when you put roads and septic and sewer and water and,
But
you know.
that's the balance to
Sure.
let go of prime state land
Right.
for private development.
Right.
That is the balance, because we might need that land for a state function.
Absolutely.
And you folks haven't been on the committee just long enough to see the process of trying to purchase state land for state function. It could be for a forensic lab. We went through that.
Mhm.
A health lab. We went through that. Secretary of State's office. We went through that. Archives. We're going through it right now for a woman's new facility. And we don't know what's happening with the juvenile Center to replace Woodside. So once you start going out there to purchase land, it's a heavy lift. Land may not be available. And it really increases the cost of your project. So that's the balance here that
Right.
we have to weigh. And in this particular one, with the wildlife management, whatever you do on that 100 acres that's left has to be compatible. Has to be compatible. That's, that's the key for that. And that's the balance that we'll have to play here at some point. Kevin?
As an ex-hunter, I would not be comfortable in more than two entities with rifles on 50 acres.
Mhm.
And it's just not practical. So you put housing in there, you have effectively nullified any opportunity to hunt. I'm not saying that's good or bad, but I mean, we're not talking enough property here to have both residential and hunting on 50 acres.
So this is 826 that we currently own.
Oh, yeah.
And again, the idea here is that if you introduce, say, 300 people, there's going to be a lot of people on this whole 826 acres. And yes, you're absolutely right. That becomes an issue. But it is also worth noting that not all hunting is rifle hunting.
No, I understand.
And, you know,
Restricted, though, is my point.
right. And it's a point well taken.
Well, folks may want to post the land, though they wouldn't have the ability to do that because it's under state ownership.
Right.
But you don't know when you have a housing development and whoever's living there, some folks may be totally opposed to hunting and want to totally ask the state to not allow hunting on that property. And that's going to create some real friction with the community of Windsor and the population around there. Those are things we have to balance here.
We share the desire to offer a safe experience for all users of this WMA, including hunters. And that's not just a desire, that's our mission.
Mhm.
So we have to be careful that what we do here is in accordance.
Sean?
So I guess this goes back to you. Have we done that? Transfer the land yet?
The
That's-
850 is.
But not that closer one.
118 acres.
So we're who's considering that?
If it ever got to that point, it would be us. So there's nothing in the capital bill. There's nothing proposed this year. This is all background information.
Gotcha.
Because Windsor has been for almost 8 years now. What are we going to do with the property? There was a point in time back, I believe it was in the 21 session, where the report was developed. Kennedy chaired, that came out of this committee because the governor, the administration at that point proposed in the capital bill that we sell the property.
Mhm.
This committee did not want to let go of a state asset. So that's why we asked there's a group of folks to come together and figure out maybe a path forward. Then there was more discussions. We just, people have kind of gotten away from selling the property. But there's more discussion in terms of what could the property be used for in a public-private partnership. And that's language we put in last year's capital bill to see if we could address some of that, well, also the year before, to address some of that. And then last year was also seeing if we could expand the wildlife management area around the facility more. So there's many, many avenues and discussions and layers to this, and it's a really difficult decision to make. Very difficult. And you got buildings on this site that you're gonna have to deal with. One way or the other, you've got to start dealing with some of these buildings. And we did want BGS to start demolishing some of these buildings. That was our goal last year. That didn't go well with the Senate and Conference Committee. That didn't work out as we had hoped. But some of these
Can you share
buildings.
why? What was their objections to?
Oh, Connor and Corey and Mary, it was, they just felt that, I'm trying to think, what was it? It was something about the sale price and the value of the land and why are we doing this?
If the historic,
No, that we got that taken
no, I
care of.
know, if the historic isn't, then
Well, there was the folks who are in real estate in this body, in the legislature, that had some strong opinions.
I think they might have some value above.
So it really didn't pan out as we had hoped. So, it's a tough decision. And I'm just gonna rephrase again, when the state needs to build a facility of some sort, whatever it may be, it is difficult to find land. And we went through that when we wanted to replace the secure residential. We wanted to keep that in central Vermont. There was no land available. And sometimes there is land available, but the cost is prohibitive. And then we expanded that out. There was a couple properties around Chittenden County, and then at the last minute, the administration decided to close the Woodside Juvenile Center. And so why don't we use that site? But now we're looking to replace Woodside, and we're trying to figure that one out. And at some point, we may have to buy land, we may not. But we're looking at some current state-owned property for that facility, and that's in Virgins. We currently own that property. For the Women's Correctional Facility, we've looked at land in Chittenden County, and we said you've got to look at state-owned land first. There's a couple parcels that are owned by the Agency of Transportation up around Essex, and that's what we're looking for the women's facility. But we're working with the town of Essex. So there's so many layers, and this is what's difficult. You've got 100 acres here of prime land that the state owns. Do we want to give it up? That's the balance that we'll have to do.
I wish that I had an answer.
Yeah, we do.
I don't. But I totally recognize the difficulty of the decisions you all have to make in that regard.
You may not have an answer, but you certainly have
An interest.
a proposal.
Yeah.
Which you don't, what I'm hearing is you don't want to give up the birding and the hunting and the walking. So the question is something is more valuable than what we're perceiving. And I'm not saying it is, I'm just. Because 100 acres, that's a primary residence. I mean, you build your dream home on that, and you probably get a really good penny for it. Well, I'm just.
100
My dad
acres.
came up and bought the last 50 acres of the farm, I mean, there's plenty of people who would love to buy that piece of property. So,
The proposal that was recently authored, I think, is about 60 acres. So it's roughly half of the remaining BGS, and at least one chunk of it, I think Director Aja aptly noted that it's quite steep and really undevelopable. But it still has the other issues of like invasive plants that we would like to get control of, and then
Yeah, can you just talk briefly about the impact of the land transfer would have on the invasive species concern?
well, it would give us the ability to control it. Right now, we don't own that land.
Yeah,
And so we don't manage it in any way. And so like I am doing currently on a
Yeah.
current property, I would apply those same practices onto this new property. So
I get, I'm
mowing
asking the
strategies.
significance and the overall impact on goals and,
Oh, I see.
yeah,
It's pretty significant.
it's a problem,
Yes,
but
where we've made progress in, not eradicating, but beating back some of these plants, all it takes is one
Yeah.
lost seed source on an abutting land to reset the clock. And for like the one plant in particular, that is the big challenge for us would be poison parsnip. And all it takes is one seed source, 1 year of missed
Yeah.
mowing,
Yeah.
and I have missed them myself and have been like, and you're back to square one. And poison parsnip is prevalent on this property. And not just the BGS piece, that was the whole.
and is that brought in by the bird species that are flying in and joining?
So interestingly, I don't think so. I mean, it'd be foolish of me to suggest that there is no transport by birds, because I'm sure there is, but I think prior to really our fully understanding the extent of invasives and our awareness of, I mean, this is not a new thing, but we have gained a lot of ground in our knowledge of invasive plant management in recent years. But prior to that, we would use the contract mowers that were mowing highways to mow these fields to keep them there and you know, to keep them open and transport seeds in the mower. We've done this since now owning it. My first year, made the mistake of not dictating to our contract mowers that they need to actually use an air compressor to blow their machinery off before going to another field, because they were literally transporting these seeds. So you can understand how it happens. It's not a fault here. It's just the way things happen. But once these species are established, getting rid of them is particularly challenging. Wild chervil is another one that's really common along the interstate corridor, and a very persistent plant that really only herbicides will kill. There's no hand pulling. There's no mowing strategy that you can use to battle it, in my opinion at this point.
So on our mediums and our interstate, we're spreading it just from those.
That's exactly what we do. And again, I mean, that's a matter of perhaps even necessity, because there's a lot of mowing that needs to happen for safety's sake and for maintenance sake. So it's not a criticism. It's just the reality that we deal with.
Yeah.
To the extent that a planned unit development may be pondered if the portion of the property still held by BGS, it may be that the acreage that it is considering being transferred may be needed to make some kind of green space requirement for future development, even if it's not developable. So that, and I don't know the site intimately, but it may be prudent to defer any conveyance until you actually figure out what's happening with the better piece or more developable piece of the BGS property.
Chicken and egg situation.
So I speak my preliminary perspective on what's been communicated.
Kevin?
Real gross estimate mathematics, sounds like it's costing us $500,000 a year to maintain the place right now.
I'm not too sure about that.
Between the mowing and the heating and this and that. I mean, is that a reasonable quick math, or is it more than that?
Vermont Fish and Wildlife is spending nowhere near that kind of money for the property that we currently own. Our budget for invasive plant control varies from year to year, depending on what we need to do, from 10,000 to 25,000.
Statewide.
No, for this WMA per year.
Yes, I'm lumping in the heating of
Oh, right.
the buildings and this and that, and then if you start talking about, and this is ridiculous, loss of property tax if you develop that, you know, I mean, there's a lot of ways to calculate it, but I'm
Right.
just trying to get a handle on what it's costing us now to
Oh,
use
right.
it as
I see
it
what you're
is
saying.
right now. It's $400,000 a
We
year.
have to yield to our colleague BGS.
So with the property that we're retaining, Representative, it's about 250. We're not in that cost, and I think this is where you're going, is the staffing cost to continue managing, if we have any management of that. That's just the electrical, the heating.
That's including staff if
It
they
is
go in.
including
Yes,
staff?
yes, it
Okay.
is.
So-
To maintain, vacant buildings.
That's our cost for the state share, and it's an estimate, we said 250 to 300. Because we get into fee for space and all of the other, that's determined what that cost is. We are doing the minimal, because they are vacant and minimal heat, but we have to keep the pumps going we have to keep the systems going.
Other questions for Fish and Wildlife? Thank you.
Thank you.
Good question.
Just one more. So are you also saying this is just because it's such a really special fish and wildlife place, that's why you're leaning against building houses out there? It's
Absolutely.
yeah, because it is.
Prime.
Yeah.
It's a prime.
I would love to take you all out there
Yeah.
to go for a walk.
Yeah, I'd
We
love to
might,
see it.
we might
Is this-
take a field trip.
Yeah.
Me in.
should do
Well,
it with the
To be clear, I
same-
don't think we're saying don't build residential.
Right, that's what I was gonna say.
We keep saying, using the word scale. I apologize that we aren't like in a position to say, well, this is the exact scale that could be compatible with our ownership. I think that's yet to be determined.
Yeah.
But I think that's correct. Yes.
Okay,
But we're not
that's good to
saying-
hear. That's good to hear. So, less is more, maybe.
And Madam Chair, we are here talking about this one report. You also asked for history. The administration has not presented anything to you this year, and I think that's important to your committee. However, I think you are aware, as I am, that the interest, once again, is it's coming back.
It's percolating.
And it's percolating, and people want to have conversations about this property. So today is really about information. We're not proposing or suggesting, we have not analyzed, BGS has not met with this developer. But interestingly enough, historically, it's the same group of community members that keep coming back. So it is, this proposal with the developer is a part of that community development. So that's been pretty consistent. Yeah. And we did find pictures.
Good, I would really like the pictures to be put up there so people have the concept of
Thank you.
the conditions of our buildings, what the buildings are.
Really.
It's really hot.
Try and close.
Welcome to the State House, right? Okay, Joe. Hopefully it shows up.
It'll eventually show.
There you go.
And so the photos that I was able to get was from a colleague watching us and sent us the appraisal report. So these are the photos I have, and I've been able to download it, so I don't know the exact order, and I'll describe them as I go through. This here is the BGS maintenance office, was originally the original farmhouse.
And
The,
that's in use now. You have staff.
we
there.
still, no, they moved to Springfield.
Oh, all right.
Basically, there's no staff stated there. There's still, it's usable. And this is outside the fence. If you look at the bottom photo here, the area that we were talking about, and it's still difficult to really understand the steep hill beyond here, but it is quite steep.
That's where the water tank is.
On top of the hill, yes.
Yeah.
I didn't hear what you said. You said it is what?
It is a very steep
Oh, steep.
incline, yes. Inside photos, scale. This is the garage that goes with that. This was, I forget the exact year that this was built, but this is relatively new compared to the rest of the facility.
And that was all used by BGS.
Yes,
So that's outside the fence.
yes, it is. Again, that's
It's not in
outside.
the
As you're
fence.
approaching, coming up State Farm Road, it would be on your left-hand side. The gatehouse doesn't have a great picture of that, but this is where, when you're approaching it as the facility, you would be stopped and be processed through this. The education building's coming up next. This would be the next building on your left as you're entering the facility, the first building basically inside the fence. This is, you probably remember, was the Futures Building back in
Yes. Ah,
under Snelling's days.
that was back when I was up.
Yeah,
That was his big initiative.
it was. And so it's a large open building. It's a split level. The area that we're looking at here in the top photo is
Building.
the education.
Parks, state parks.
It's prefabbed.
Yeah.
They had people during their time for needed to be employed. They had set up several warehouses, certain areas across the state, prefabbed 4x10-foot panels, and then were delivered to a site and put on a slab like this, and the trusses were brought in. So it went pretty quick. And there are a lot of buildings that were done, BGS buildings.
Why'd they get rid of that program?
Well, it wasn't run by DOC per se, was
I
it?
don't remember who this was run by, but we evolved to the furniture.
You evolved to the furniture that was run by DOC, but then
the-
you got more in Newport.
Incarcerated individuals did not do this. This was just people who were unemployed. During
Unemployment.
the-
We had a
the
high
80s were-
unemployment rate, early
That was
eighties.
when the construction trade, I think that's.
crashed.
It was
The
probably
early
like
80s.
76, I was gonna say 77, 78.
Early eighties.
Yeah.
83. my freshman year. My freshman year, I still remember the debate on the floor and he was sending notes to Republicans to vote for it. So a lot of people didn't want to vote for it. I remember that. I was a freshman. I said, what the heck's going on here?
The backside of
We
this,
came back for a special session because we had a $30 million deficit in our state budget,
in 83.
83. Our state budget was 300 million at the time.
Wow.
Anyways.
More than you wanted to know.
My house was 38 grand and all
Yeah,
that.
right, the 13%.
Yeah.
So this is the backside of the building in the bottom photo. It was shop space.
It was used by DOC.
DOC, they had when the women were in here, I forget what this was their shop area. They were building things. Over time, it has ebbed and flow as to a furniture shop and the likes of that.
Did that also become a print shop? That didn't come.
We moved the plate shop there.
Plate shop.
For DMV, we took it away from, so you created, what I'm remembering is that we created the furniture program and the print program with DOC. Because they also printed documents and books and
Yeah.
posters, and we wanted the women to be engaged, so we moved the plate program to Windsor. And that only lasted, I think, a couple of years.
I think that was the year there was a little problem with the
Well, yeah.
state seal.
So,
The 1 year there was a problem.
It was a little pig.
Yes.
The state police.
As you continue up inside the fence here, this is the building known as the dorm and dining. And this held around 85, 90
Yeah.
Individuals over 3 floors. And also has their dining hall. The dining hall was also their area of indoor recreation. They did not have a gym at this facility.
Do you have any pictures of the inside of that? Probably not.
There you go.
There you go, some of that.
This here is the kitchen. Here's the dining hall recreation area. And then this here was master control looking out into that area.
But you don't have any pictures of the cells or the
There
hallway?
were no cells. It was gypsum board walls down there. And the individuals were allowed to come and go. They had keys to their rooms and they could lock it. And so there were typically a minimum of 4 to a room. Restroom shots. So here's a typical room that you would see. It did have bars on the windows. The personnel could open the windows from the inside. This was the basement area of what was called dorm 3. Over the years, it has ebbed and flows an interior rec area and or overflow for dorm space. And there have been times when we have corrections double bunked in this basement area. Again, outside looking at the admin building that is connected through an enclosed porch to the dorm building. And this is where most of the years from the 80s when I was involved up till 2010, 2015 was the admin building. It was then at the end turned into the nurses doctor building. And that was the original, I think, residence for the superintendent back in the day. This here's the also known as Echo Dorm, I believe, the North Country Dorm. This is the one that was high up on the hill. This is where, depends on the program that was being run at the time, more than likely or better incarcerated individuals. It was also a dorm area. I think there were 8 rooms and up to 2 bunks into a room. Most of the individuals here would go out and they left the area and were gone for the whole day. By and large. Did
It's
have,
a minimum security facility.
it was high up on a hill. This is the one that has that roughly distance of razor ribbon to 3 feet to the roof. This was their living area, day room, that they could actually sit there and overlook the whole yard. It was actually a nice place. Here we get into what is known as the admin building. It was a metal building back in the day. It is 80s was the print screen shop, screen printing that corrections took place. And when the administration moved down, they moved into this building and created the admin building into a nursing room. This here is known as the plate shop, and that's exactly where the license plates were manufactured. You brought the raw aluminum in one end, and out the other end came all the plates.
One letter at a time.
I think yeah.
Yes.
You would take the stamp, you put them all in a row, hit the button, press that, and then off to the next stage through printing, painting and everything else. Interesting. Yes. And so this is just looking into it. It's just once the plate shot had moved out, it was used for other storage and other programming items. This here's the sign machine shop. Over the years, corrections with signs, they would make signs for AOT. V-Trans for the highways and towns, you could buy them. They've done signage for BGS. And then as the sign shop moved out, they used it for other areas here. This here was turned into a weight room. Another interior photo of that in a different location. This is the one of BGS's maintenance storage buildings. This one here was one of the original farm buildings. Nice attic where we store things up there. This here is another garage, original to the farm. Nice interior wood. We also had walk-in coolers and freezers down there. When the men were down there in the 80s and the 90s, they actually had a large farm and made their own, froze all their vegetables, made their own tomato sauce. It's quite interesting.
No cows.
Boiler house. This here was a chunk fired boiler. When the men were there, they kept that operational. It served multiple buildings on the facility. When the women moved in, they were not inclined to be taking, 3-foot chunks of wood and throwing it into the boiler.
I didn't set that policy.
Sawmill, back in the 80s, 90s, before it went out of business being a sawmill, they actually logged the wood off of the property. It was all used for heating. It was guardrail posts for transportation, survey stakes, witnesses and the likes of that. AOT and BGS would purchase the stakes from them. The wooden guardrails also that were put forth on the post. So individuals did a lot of work down there. When it was a farm in the early 80s, there was no fence even around the facility.
Minimum security.
Yes. They operated front end loaders, the works, went up on the fields. They did have a correctional officer with them, but basically, a lot of them drove the truck.
Mhm.
This here's an original building, the slaughterhouse, used for storage. No. Lumber drying act. This here was when they were using it for wood heat, this would be loaded with all chunk wood. And some of it also when they're, swapped out certain areas of it and other storage barns for where they had their guardrail posts and likes of that. This here's the creosote building. Since I've been here, there's been no creosote there. It's a nice clean building, metal building, and just sitting there idle.
It was used for really guardrails and telephone posts.
Back in the day, yes.
Back in the day.
It was the heifer barn. The heifer barn actually was built in the early 80s. Where you could then, as they were on the inside, you just open up the doors and you're able to just shovel, right out the end.
What an
And that,
interesting name for a building. I'm sorry, the heifer.
the heifers, the heifers,
Oh, heifer barn.
the heifer barn.
Most of the heifers go.
That's right.
I know, I just,
It's
cow barn would work.
But they're not cows, they're heifers.
right.
Oh,
They're baby cows.
Baby cows.
They're baby cows.
This here is it doesn't do well, I guess, for the flat brick barn, but that is the major barn itself with the silos. I haven't been down there probably for about 5 years now, but I know when you look at the silos, they're in great condition. It's on the turnbuckles on the bands on the silos are still nice and shiny. There's the backstop for the ball field.
May I interject? Do we have any idea what the commercial value of this property
Mhm.
as is?
This is an appraisal.
Yeah, I
We do,
haven't looked at it, but
Okay.
do.
the milk house. This here, on the backside, it does connect to the barn. We have installed before corrections moved out,
Okay.
greenhouses. There are two greenhouses and a head house constructed.
Little veggies.
The hay barn, that is outside the fence. And you can see the top of the ridge. First to show, yes, that's the top of the ridge. Up above, so it's quite high. Off to the left, this here is that North Country dorm building. Fuel storage, again, back in the day when they were running the front end loaders, diesel storage. This is shed outside the fence. I believe we have 3 sheds outside the fence. Top of the hill, this is the water storage tank that was constructed. So it's enough to provide hydrant, sprinkler, and domestic drinking water. And I believe that's all the photos.
So as you can see, no matter what you do with the property, we have a lot of buildings that we own. So part of the discussions we've had is, do we demolish some of those? Part of the discussion we've had is, what's the value of the property and what's the cost of demolishing? And if someone is to buy this property, they would have to demolish the buildings. So then would we get into negotiations with a potential buyer or developer that we would have to demolish the buildings? And then that gets into your sale price. Because we have probably at least 5, 6 buildings that would have to be demolished, possibly.
I think that's where the discussion was going in prior years, was which ones do you demolish?
Mhm.
Because we may deem that it's not worthy. Others may deem that are worthy, and that's that, which ones do you want to take down? The ones that are wood and old versus some of the metal buildings that are more, open across the open span and make it easier to redevelop. And that's where we sort of got hung up.
So, Madam Chair, I think it's important though for the committee to know if you were considering this or if the administration at some point came back. When we're required to advertise and get the highest, the best value. But when we go into negotiations, when there's contaminated site or there's buildings or other things, buyers will come back with a fair market value based on them demolishing or based on their assessment that there may be buildings with asbestos. So when you do a straight purchase, and this is going on currently with the property in Burlington.
Cherry.
Yes, and well, we have a sales agreement, but they've done site assessments. There's some conditions there, so they come back with a fair market value with the remediation of that being deducted.
So it's a lower level.
So it's a lower level. So that's a normal process with the straight real estate transaction. So when and if you get there, that's one of the options where we don't have to think about it. Or we may have to do certain things to prepare it, and it could be a partnership of everyone, that everything that we're talking about.
Kevin?
What if you had a nonprofit group that wanted to buy it and use it for drug rehabilitation? As is. Obviously, they would need to bring some things up to code, et cetera, but literally use it as it is.
Well, I'm going to, any bank or real estate deal, they're still gonna do an assessment on the value. So buying it as is would be at a lesser value, and any reports or documents that we have would transfer. I think it's the same thing with the property. It's, for us, it's not about the intended use. That's the partnership. It's the transaction and how we get rid of the property or dispose of the property legally.
And maybe we're talking different things, but it certainly would be of value to the state of Vermont if we could house and rehabilitate 80 individuals who want their lives to be clean of drugs, and they're willing to come and work and learn skills and be able to come and go on a.
It could work in the wildlife management area.
There's a lot of things they could do.
Parsnip.
I mean, they literally would grow food, they would take care of. I mean,
For
there's-
725.
You're sounding more like us, Kevin.
no, no, I'm telling you, well, it's happening right in Henniker, New Hampshire right now.
That's,
So
yeah.
if there was interest in partnering with the state of Vermont for the right price, there's probably a nonprofit group out there that would love to have access to this as is and then clean it up so that it was humane and usable rather than destroying what's possible right now.
Windsor's.
Scope of the purpose of today.
Well, it's part of it.
But Windsor,
It's just.
Windsor is not wanting to,
No, it's, we gotta figure out what we're
or
gonna
any of
do.
those ideas.
Oh.
That's one of
It's an
the,
overview, but you gotta figure out, it's not going away, this property. Sean?
Is there septic there?
Connected to the town,
Yeah,
septic,
town-
sewer plant.
Wow,
Yeah.
really?
Yes.
Because we were gonna
In
expand.
the
Developer
90s.
just perked up.
No, but that drives, well,
You got
I was
those
thinking
flowers.
renovating the buildings that are there and turn them into housing,
Make an offer.
but some kind of house. We do have a housing crisis. I just want everyone to keep that in mind. So there's septic. Is a lot of the concrete in all those buildings pretty sound still?
Depends on the building, but yes, the older ones that, some of the original ones.
Yeah.
Heaved a little on the inside.
Because they don't have like proper frost walls or whatever.
Exactly.
Yeah,
But the other ones, absolutely.
Keep the balance of the wildlife
Everything
management.
you want.
No.
Keep the balance of the wildlife management area, keep the balance of the acreage and how it is being managed and used. That's what's before us. That's what's before, and I know something seems really attractive. But and also keep a balance, state-owned property.
Yep.
Of about 60, 80 acres of these is buildable, and we have state needs. And then sometimes it's really difficult to buy state lands, and it's nice to know you have some state land that you can use. Just, that's the balance that you have to use. So put the emotions aside. You gotta really think it through, and that's what we've been struggling for a long time. And you may have a piece of property, and I'm just throwing numbers out. This is not anything with that property. You may have a piece of property that's worth $3 or $4 million. But it's gonna cost you $3 or $4 million to upgrade the property. And that's what you have to balance.
Yep.
Does the state pay that money? To make it put on the market? Do you sell it for $1? Because you know the developer's gotta put in that kind of money.
Right.
That's what you end up with. And those are all factors that this committee has to weigh over time with all of our projects. But this one in particular is a difficult one. This
Are we
one's
gonna-
really difficult.
more testimony on, or just,
Not this year, because there's no proposal
well,
per
it's,
se. There's no proposal, but this is a good time for the committee to really get this in-depth background
Yep.
in this, because it's not going away. It's a good place to take a field trip, because the
Yep.
committee has done a field trip there in the past. This time of year is a lot better than it was in February. We did it last night, and Marcia just having a knee replacement.
Yeah.
But it, and it's a good drive down there. It's an hour down, a little bit more than an hour down. It's a good, just all interstates, a good drive down. Connor,
we just kind of spitballing where we're at.
Hmm?
Are we just kind of spitballing? Okay, yeah.
we don't know where
I
we're
can,
at.
I can introduce my water park, no? I think like, I'd agree with the chair, I've been through a bunch of scenarios where we try to find property, especially for a human service, building. And it is tough, and I think we're gonna see how tough it is maybe with Essex, Bridgeends, so the committee will be acquainted with that.
You got to experience.
So
it.
that's, that's very real to me. At the same time, I'm thinking the politics of this, and we're already hearing whispering around the building. We can only hold this back so long.
Yeah,
I think by the time we had that human services need, people sitting in these seats or a new administration will probably get rid of that property. And then I think of like, okay, if it's costing us $250,000 a year to do this, compared to what if we did have these units up there that are generating income tax, property tax, economic development all around there? You probably know I have strong feelings about state land and housing here. I think
Inventory,
Wait, you do?
inventory.
inventory. So I'm thinking it's time to take a serious look at that balance the wildlife needs, get a proposal on the table if there's some interest right now. And really, like, I sound like a fiscal conservative, but right by taxpayers, instead of spending money, bring some money in on this.
Yeah.
And you know what? Our state's dying. We all ran on this. This was like our top issues, housing. This is an opportunity to do something good, I think, and a great place that would help the community and the state. So that's where I'm at.
Yeah.
And I'd sell it for $1 and say, you own what you got there for $1. You remediate it. You tear down the buildings. We don't need to make a profit off it, but we don't need to lose money either on it.
With the agreement that it's housing.
Exactly. Yeah.
I think we got to be careful and really take into consideration the testimony of Fish and Wildlife with a wildlife management area and not be willy-nilly about this.
Well, with
Because there's really some serious issues there with wildlife management because it really does encircle a lot of that in the community. The community, before that land was transferred, they wanted to preserve that and find a way to put it in some state ownership beyond BGS that would really manage that property for people in the community to have access to it for hunting, for birding, for hiking, and just green space. And I would be very, very cautious.
Yep.
Not to have a knee-jerk reaction and say, yep, let's build housing here and not think of the consequences. I just want to put that on the table.
Yeah.
Because I think the wildlife management area, those are delicate areas. And if you're going to be talking about hunting, that's going to play in. And there's a deer population there as well as a bear population. And if you have housing near a bear habitat, you're going to have problems. Just putting that out for people that have bears come into their property on a pretty regular basis. James.
I was just gonna say, for me, I don't like speculating, so I would be much happier to be able to go see this place and get an idea of the lay of the land, what it is, before I was to make any kind of, as you say, knee-jerk reaction. And just seeing the place is not gonna necessarily be my 100%, but I would feel much more comfortable having a conversation about what my thoughts are after I've actually seen the place, rather than sitting here and throwing out ideas that I may have that may or may not be good. Yeah. I got a lot of ideas, but they're probably not good.
So I wanted a chance when we weren't in the throes of putting together a capital bill or having to really make a decision. I wanted a chance for the people, for the committee, for folks here to really get some background information on this. Understand all the moving pieces, because at some point we are going to have to make a decision on this. And I just want to say again, you got to balance this.
Yeah.
This is not.
Did the Windsor reps or senators have any different feeling as to how the township was feeling, or is it pretty much still
I think it's still the.
heels in the dug in? That's
Some
always
people are just
huge.
waiting. I think some people, I think it's the same and do have to work with the community. It's not a
Right.
simple slam dunk where a state wants to do something.
Yeah.
A community weighs in, and that's what we're seeing in Virginia, and that's what we're seeing in Essex.
So can we work on getting a field trip down there so we
We
can?
we can get a field trip down. It's not a problem. We have to do it pretty soon.
Yeah.
Because we're not that busy on the floor for that. But anything else while we have the folks here in the room?
Thank you guys so much.
Good discussion.
Thank you. We appreciate it. Appreciate it. Anything else? So we're done
No,
this
it's always
morning,
good.
this afternoon, right after the floor, right? We're taking a,
Here. And Joe Tremblay will come get us, and bring us to.
so we're gonna go up to the dog.
That's door.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you can't go by yourself. No, this is structured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, everybody.
It's structured. So meet here after the floor and then we'll take a trip up to the dome. Make sure you got shoes on that can go upstairs because you're gonna be going up a pretty high stairway. Bring your camera
Yeah.
because there'll be great views, great pictures. If you're afraid of heights, we'll be sensitive to that.
Is there railing?
There is railings on the stairway to go up. And then when you go outside, you'll be at the bottom of Cirrus, the statue. And there, it's all enclosed there. Don't look down.
Yeah,
look
we'll
straight.
It's
And then we've got, what do we got after that? We don't have anything after that, do we? What?
Scheduled Katie on Friday.
We scheduled Katie on Friday. So let's come back afterwards because we can talk about if we want to make a recommendation to judiciary, I'm not gonna hit you, to judiciary about the reduced sentence
Yeah.
thing. And I would just want to do a little temperature check on the H32 to see where we are on that bill, if we're gonna get it out or not. I mean, we've done a lot of work on it, but we haven't really talked about where people are coming in on that bill. I'd like to know what folks are thinking.
Sounds good.
Which
32.
32.
32.
So we're done for the morning.